go.
Thank you. Well, I welcome councillors and staff to the ordinary council meeting, 22nd February 2022 at 2:05 p.m. and I declare the meeting open. The Morgan Spring Bay acknowledges the traditional owners of our region and recognises their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Are there any apologies? Well, it looks as if all councillors are present. Are there any late reports?
No late reports.
I request elected members to indicate whether they have any interest personally or via a close associate as defined in section 47 of the Local Government Act 1993 or any conflict as described in the Council's Code of Conduct for Councillors. In any item included in, yes.
It's Annie Browning, Councillor Browning.
Yes, Annie.
I've got a conflict of interest in 8.2.
8.2. Community Small Grant Application, Ernest Family Bicentenary Committee Incorporated.
Correct.
Thank you. Well, I'll ask you
Mayor,
to decline to deal with and absence yourself from the meeting when this item comes up.
Councillor Brini.
First item.
Mayor, Councillor Brini.
thank you, Mayor.
Yes.
Just a pedantic issue. When you were referring to the section of the Local Government Act, you indicated section 47. It's in fact written down as 49.
Thank you for correcting me. I appreciate that. Please feel free to correct me anytime I make a mistake. Everyone. Item 2, confirmation of minutes. Ordinary meeting of council, Tuesday, 25 January 2022. Can I have a motion?
I'll move, Councillor Woods,
Thank you.
that the minutes of the
Second.
ordinary meeting of council held on the 25th of January 2022 at 2 p.m. be confirmed as a true and correct record.
Is there a second?
Yeah, Councillor Brini, I second that motion.
Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye or indicate by raising their hand.
Aye.
Aye.
I declare the motion carried unanimously. Item 2.2, page 6 of the agenda, date and purpose of workshops held. The detail is in the agenda. Can I have a motion?
Councillor Robinson.
Thank you.
Council notes the information.
Is there a seconder?
Councillor Arnold, I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Arnold. All those in favour, please raise their hand and say aye.
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 I declare the motion carried unanimously. Item 3, public question time. There are some printed questions on notice, item 3.1, and the response from General Manager Greg Ingham is printed in the agenda. Item 3.2. Are there any questions without notice?
There are no questions.
Thank you very much. Then we go on to item 4, Planning Authority section. Can I have a motion, please?
Councillor Arnold, I'll move that council now acts as a planning authority at 2:11 p.m.
Thank you, Councillor Arnold. Is there a seconder?
I'll second.
Sorry.
Who?
Councillor Wood?
Councillor Deputy Mayor Wood?
Yes.
I ask, I now put the motion to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye and raise their hand.
Aye.
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 Against? I declare the motion carried. The first item on the planning agenda is item 4.1. And there's the detailed report running a number of pages.
Please back to this.
It's on the
Thank you.
agenda. And I have, sorry, can I have a recommendation? That's item RA 128 Cambria Drive, Dolphin Sands. Can I have a motion?
Councillor
Yes,
Wood?
Deputy Mayor Wood.
Thank you. I'll move that pursuant to Section 57 of Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993 and the Glamorgan Spring Bay Interim Planning Scheme 2015, development application 2021/334 at RA 128 Cambria Drive, Dolphin Sands, PT 1222591/47, be approved for reasons outlined in the officer's report, subject to the following conditions 1 through to 7, plus advice.
Is there a second?
Councillor Arnold, I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Arnold. Do you wish to speak to the motion, Councillor Woods?
No, it's pretty self-explanatory in my opinion, Mayor.
Councillor Arnold, do you wish to speak to the motion?
No, thank you. Thank you. It was, I think, a very good report. As Deputy Mayor has said, it was self-explanatory.
Does anyone wish to speak to or for or against the motion? I put the motion. All those in favour, please.
Sorry, Mayor.
Yes.
Councillor Breening had his hand up.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear. I didn't see. It doesn't show. It doesn't show him on the screen when he raises his hand, only when he opens his mouth.
Thank you.
Councillor Breeny, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I apologise, I had my mute on as well. I just want to make a brief comment. I will be supporting the motion, and in accordance with the Land Use Planning Approvals Act, we're required to determine if the proposal meets performance criteria, and we are required to consider issues raised by representors. Now, the report very clearly and very succinctly deals with the issues of the performance criteria, which are straightforward. In dealing with the requirement for us to consider the issues raised by representors, it was pretty clear also that the representations related to several issues, but almost in every instance, except for a couple of instances that were dealt with by the performance criteria, Representor 1 was asking about issues that the same Representor 2 seemed to be presuming that the development might have been commercial, when in fact the application is for a dwelling, not for a commercial thing. So as a planning authority, we're not required to look at that. However, it would be assumed that council has in place provision for ensuring that if somebody does utilise a planning permit outside of the conditions of the permit, that matter can be addressed, and that should satisfy that representor as well. Representor 4 indicated that they had health issues in relation to a wood fire. Well, a wood fire is not an issue that can be looked at the planning scheme as well. Things can be handled through the planning scheme, but certainly not other than just to ensure that the building, when it's constructed, has a heater fitted that is in accordance with standards, and that's a matter for the building code. So I'm quite happy to support this report and also to commend the author to the way that it was presented. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Breening. Those comments are much appreciated. They go to answer some of the issues raised by the representatives, and it is nice to see a good report. Does anyone else wish to say anything? Please speak up so I can see you. Well, seeing that I see no one else raising their hand or speaking, I put the motion. All those in favour, please raise their hand and say aye.
Aye.
Against? I declare the motion carried unanimously. The next item is on page 25 of the agenda, 4.2. It's a proposal for a dwelling, 1000 Dolphin Sands Road. I wish to just make a couple of procedural comments about this application. It's not an application by the owner of the land. The owner of the land has been notified, apparently, but it's an application by an entity, and it's difficult to know what the entity is. It's called S Group. It's not, appears not to be a corporation or an individual or even a legal entity. It appears to be something along the lines of some sort of advertising comment. But nevertheless, do I have a motion relating to this application? I hear someone talk.
Mayor,
Yes, Councillor Breen. Yes, Councillor Breen.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be putting forward the following motion. Pursuant to Section 57 of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act 1993 and the Glamorgan Spring Bay Interim Planning Scheme 2015, Development Application 2021-231 at 1000 Dolphin Sands Road, Dolphin Sands, in brackets CT 54666/157, be refused as it fails to meet the requirements relating to Development Standards E16 7.1 in brackets P1 in brackets B brackets C and brackets H. Specifically, the application has not demonstrated that the erosion risk arising from wave run-up, including impact and material suitability, will be mitigated to an acceptable level through structural or design methods used to avoid damage to or loss of buildings or works. Dot point, the application has not demonstrated that erosion risk is mitigated to an acceptable level. And third dot point, the application has not demonstrated that the access to the site will not be lost or substantially compromised by expected future erosion, whether on the proposed site or off-site. And there are inconsistencies between the information provided within the application form for planning approval and the supporting documents, specifically details on cut and fill, site lot size and site access.
Could you please specify what you see the specific, differences between cut and fill on the application and any other documentation?
Point of order, Mayor. Sorry,
Yes.
we need to have a seconder for this to be discussed.
Yes, please.
I'm sorry again, Deputy Mayor, would you please repeat the comment?
For you to ask that question, we need to have a seconder for the motion.
I'll second the motion.
It's on the. Can you see the motion?
Well, I wish to make this comment before a seconder is called for. Under
We
the,
can't.
well, I'm going to make the comment. If
Mayor, you
want to
can't
send
make
the
a
ruling
comment
report-
before it's passed. Sorry. So the motion is on the screen. Can you all see it? The motion from Councillor Keith Breeny.
No.
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 No,
Okay, we'll try and get that up now. So what's on the screen
Oh, yeah.
is what
Oh,
Councillor Breeny has just motioned. Can you see that?
Yes.
I can now just see it. I'll have
So
to
we
bring
did
it forward.
We need a seconder for that.
I'll second that motion. Councillor Churchill.
Well, councillors, I wish to bring to your information the provisions of local government meeting procedures, which says by Regulation 25, acting as a planning authority, the general manager is to ensure that the reasons for a decision by a council or committee acting as a planning authority are recorded in the minutes of the meeting. Now, we've had some reference in this motion which has been moved, and there is a seconder. You had reference to some inconsistencies, but it seems to me to comply with that regulation, if we're going to have to rely on inconsistencies, they must be specified. And we can't, for instance, have a motion such as this supported for reasons other than those set forth in the motion itself, if we're going to rely on the expression in the motion as to what the reasons are for the refusal to approve this proposal. And what I did in order to ensure compliance with Regulation 25 is invite the mover to specify what the 2 points of inconsistency was or were. One of the points I understood was, if my memory's right, the question of cut and fill. You haven't said where the consistency is, Councillor Breeny, and the other matter is a problem with the access, and you haven't stated what the problem was. And I think if we're going to rely on the motion to say why this matter should be refused, those inconsistencies in that matter should be specified in the motion.
Can I reply to your statement? Can I reply to your statements, please, Mayor?
Yeah, can.
I'm about to provide, when I am speaking to the motion that I've made, all of the answers to those questions that you're going to ask and you have asked. And I would assume that in a motion, this motion, for example, that I've put, my page and a half of reasons for the wording, the careful wording of that motion, which wasn't a page and a half, is because you cannot put the reasons for all of the issues in relation to the motion in the motion itself. But if I was to comply with the Act, I would assume, that's meeting procedures, I would assume that the reasons that I give for this motion and my refusal, my vote for refusal, my single vote for refusal, would be recorded. And I've sent a copy of that document, a page and a half of my reasons for what I've just put up, to the clerk of the meeting, so that to the secretary of the meeting, so that that could be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. I just cannot understand why an Act would require that every reason, single reason for example, my statement in this motion, and there are inconsistencies between the information provided within the application form for planning approval and the supporting documents, specifically details on cut and fill, site lot size and site access. If I go on now to explain over 2 paragraphs what they are referring to, I don't believe that needs to be in a motion. It needs to be recorded as reasons for refusal.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brenny. I'll ask the General Manager whether he will be satisfied that he'll be able to ensure the reasons for the decision include these extra items that are not in the motion, so he can comply with Regulation 25 of the
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
regulation. General Manager, how do you see that?
I'm satisfied with the motion as put by Councillor Keith Brenny and as it reads on the screen now. Meets both the meeting regulations criteria and the planning authority rules as well. So I'm happy with that motion as it stands now.
Thank you. Does the seconder wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, I will, but I was going to wait for the
Yes, please.
mover to speak to the motion first, if that's okay.
Oh, yes, that's in order. Councillor Brenny, would you please like to speak?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Churchill. In my judgment, there are a series of issues that do not enable me to support the original recommendation and have led to me placing this motion on Council's table. The planner's report relies upon professional qualified advice provided in the application, and I understand that this is the valid basis for recommendations and conditions associated with this report. My firm assertion is that the professional qualified information provided with the development application is flawed and therefore misleading and therefore must be corrected, reassessed, and the amended application should be reassessed. A series of anomalies include incorrect, misleading details contained in the application form relating to cut and fill, an outdated site and soil assessment report relating to wastewater treatment, and a coastal vulnerability assessment that relies upon grossly outdated climate change data. The claim on the application form that the development does not involve cut and fill may be considered on face value to be a simple typographic error, but it is possible that representors may have been influenced by this statement, and so the effective presentation of details of the development have been misrepresented to the public. A simple re-advertising of the application would have eliminated this mistake and would have reduced the likelihood of misrepresentation. This is a transparency and good governance issue, as well as a simple planning matter. The site and soil assessment report, I think it was by Mason, shows a site plan, page 277 of attachments. If you refer to that site plan, it does not show the correct location or layout of the proposed dwelling. It seems to be related to a previous different development, although on this lot, and is misleading. The location of the AES, aerated treatment bed, disposal bed, sorry, AES bed, is shown in the inundation zone of this lot, and the dimensions are given as 1.1 metres by 1.35. This is incorrect information. The Coastal Vulnerability Assessment was provided by Geo Environmental Solutions, GES, and is dated 2015. This coincides with the presentation of this same report for the previous lapsed 2017 development application for this site. This report is currently 7 years out of date and relies entirely on obsolete data related to assessments of coastal inundation and coastal erosion. These two issues, inundation and coastal erosion, are standard issues that must be addressed in the planning assessment, particularly relevant here in a vulnerable coastal area. To overlook or underestimate their importance violates the Land Use Planning Approvals Act 93 in that it fails to meet the requirements of Development Standards E16 7.1, Performance Criteria B, C and H. In relation to these performance criteria, I refer to the source of the coastal vulnerability data provided by GES assessment. The source of that data and associated assumptions of erosion and inundation provided in the assessment are based entirely upon the Department of Premier and Cabinet DPAC Coastal Hazards in Tasmania Summary Report on Coastal Hazard Technical Report DPAC 2016. That's 2016. That report, the projections used in the DPAC report, are based purely on the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change 5th Assessment Report, IPCC 5AR, dated 2014. The DPAC report is now outdated and has been superseded by the latest 2021 IPAC 6AR. All the assumptions contained in the GES assessment are superseded and obsolete. It is clear from the 2021 6AR report that the estimates and projections for sea level rise and storm surge as used by the proponents' report are now grossly understated. And as an example of the likely degree of disparity, sea level rise and coastal vulnerability section of the latest report states that by 2050, many latitudes will experience 1 in 100 year events every year. To ignore the fact relegates a planning authority to ignore these facts relegates a planning authority to the status, I believe, of climate change deniers, and I would be guilty of failing to implement fundamental statutory planning obligations by ignoring critical information relating to key sections of a planning scheme. The report itself states, and this goes to the heart of planning decisions made in relation to this issue, very important issues in relation to what we are supposed to be looking at under the planning scheme and part of what we consider to be the planning scheme requirements, and that states, choosing and implementing responses is further challenged through various coastal stakeholders having conflicts of interest in the future development of heavily used coastal zones. Our planning scheme insists that we seriously consider the impacts of climate change and sea level rise when considering proposed development in coastal zones. This proposal is a classic example of a coastal development in coastal zone and one that requires serious consideration. I did not agree that the information provided in the report adequately addressed the related performance criteria, and therefore I have placed this second motion. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to add anything, either for or against this motion, before I call upon the seconder to speak? Councillor Churchill, do you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, if I may. I continue to be both amazed and frustrated by the high number of development applications that come before GSBC with blatant flaunting of the building regulations. Does Tasmania not have architects that can follow guidelines? I've just read a quote from a representative regarding this proposed development and others. I share the same frustrations. I find this application for planning approval document quite disturbing and confusing. I'm aware of 3 issues of concern in this document. Firstly, the size of the site is presented as 2,025 square metres. I believe the lot to be approximately 20,000 square metres, as all of the lots in this area to the south of Dolphin Sands Road are around 20,000 square metres. Number 2, it is indicated that there is to be no cut and fill involved in the proposal. This is inconsistent with the diagrams presented in the supporting documents, where a considerable amount of cut and fill is indicated. Thirdly, the site distance in both directions for vehicle access to Dolphin Sands Road is not stated. Included in the application is a declaration signed by the applicant that, and I quote, "The information in this application is true and correct." I seriously question this part of the declaration in this case. I believe this application to be inconsistent with supporting documents and potentially misleading. The inconsistencies in the application undermines my confidence in other statements within the supporting documents. The same application for development approval is available to the public during the legislated public consultation period. This and all other documents should be factual and accurate. The house at number 1010, next door to 1000, is used for height comparison, I think. What it shows me is that a house could be built at 1000 Dolphin Sands Road with a 5 metre height above natural ground level and further north outside of the coastal erosion zone, and could more easily and more appropriately comply with the planning scheme.
Yes.
On such a large parcel of land, the applicant has the opportunity to construct a dwelling with far less environmental impact and with less risk from the effects of coastal erosion, and to be more consistent with other local development. Thank you.
Councillor Breeny, I note you've supported the motion, and the motion deals with the question of access and the speed limit. I understand on the road outside the access, the maximum speed limit has some effect on the size and form of access. Do you have any comment to make about that?
Thank you, Mayor. I only have one comment to make, and it may be irrelevant, but I understand that this crossover may have been approved at a previous development. This is the section from the actual side of the bitumen road to the front boundary. But I do understand that this application includes approval of driveway access in relation to things like its paving, passing lanes, etc. Stopping sight distance on an 80-kilometre road, I presume that there are people who are more up to date than I was, 10 years ago when I was dealing with this sort of thing. But you're required to have a certain distance either side of clear vision from the driveway crossover to ensure that traffic safety, basically oncoming traffic. The point here could well be that I haven't been able to assess from this application whether or not the driveway that's being approved in any way compromises the design of the crossover. In other words, with width, location, or level, things like that. Those matters needed to be looked at from my point of view, from the point of view of whether or not we were approving a driveway to a potentially, and I'm not saying this is the case, but it quite potentially could be an unsafe crossover. Given that in the meantime, since the previous approval, which I presume might have been in 2017, looks like that was the last development application that was approved, that application may have taken into account things like a differing speed limit. I don't know whether that's the case, and I don't think that information was provided with this application. The fact that simply on the front of the application form, there is no reference whatsoever to an approval of a driveway. It's just a question on the application form that says, has sight distance been assessed? And the blankness of the reply seemed to indicate that it wasn't. And that was the point that I think that's being raised here. We need to know these sorts of things, whether it was raised, whether it wasn't, whether it was previously approved at, and that sort of thing. These unknowns or these anomalies are things that we as a planning authority should not have to guess. They should be provided.
Thank you. Councillor Churchill, do you have any comment about the speed limit and access?
Yes, I'll make a comment. It's not about the speed limit and access. I mean, I don't have the qualification to do that, but my comment is that the question is asked without any reason for the question, but there are obviously reasons behind it. It's asked in the application for planning approval. If vehicular access is from a road signposted at more than 60 kilometres per hour, please state the site distance in both directions. I wouldn't have thought that was an unreasonable request for any DA, and this road in that area is 80 kilometres an hour, so it's clearly over 60. So my question is more around the application planning approval form than anything. Why was that question not filled in? Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak for or against the motion?
Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson.
Yeah, just a comment, neither one way or the other, but as a result of this application and the previous one, I've had a good look at the ICC AR6 report, which was completed in 2021. And the inundation and erosion area, coastal erosion area that's showing on their initial diagram is based on older data, as Councillor Breeney said. But the new report shows the same area, and they've actually identified it in there in the attachment. The same area is inundated as their original diagram, just greater areas of water in the same sorts of areas. And basically, if you look at that information, the house site where they're proposing the house will basically be surrounded by water by the eastern side, and the proposed shed will actually be inundated. So, and in their chart, where they identify low hazard, medium hazard, high hazard, they're still classifying this proposal as low hazard, and I guess that's something I don't understand. How can be a low hazard when the building will virtually be surrounded by water, more water than they show in their first diagram there. And that information, you can look at a coastal vulnerability assessment report. You can just find it on the web, and you can look up any area in Australia. You can just, and Dolphin Sands is there. And that inundation information I'm referring to is by 2100. Of course, it's a long way off. And I understand council doesn't necessarily have a responsibility for someone building a house in that position. But as Councillor Breeney has said, you know, we're 1 in 100-year storms now. Some of those are likely to occur every year now rather than 1 in 100 years. So I just am a bit befuddled by their reference to low hazard, I guess, with that information I've just provided.
Does anyone else wish to make a comment? Well, I wish to make a comment. I'm sorry, Councillor Churchill.
Sorry, take me off mute.
Councillor Churchill, we can't hear you.
You can now, I hope. Just to make comment on that, and you're probably on this than I am, Councillor Robinson, but I actually thought that the was classified medium under the coastal erosion hazards, but I'm not sure of that. I don't know, Councillor Breeney might remember, or someone else more qualified might tell me if one of the planners.
Thank you. If no one else wishes to make a comment, I want to raise something. I concur with the mover and seconder of this motion and what Councillor Robinson has to say. The application itself worries me a considerable amount. Once upon a time, when you applied for a development application, and if it was the subject of an appeal one way or the other before a tribunal of some sort, there was no likelihood of a question of costs. Nowadays, some matters going before a tribunal can run into the hundreds of thousands of dollars in costs. Here we have an application by a name, but it doesn't indicate that it is a corporation or a proprietary limited company or a limited company. It doesn't have an Australian company number for either of those odd matters. It doesn't have...
Mr. Mayor, can I just interrupt there, sorry?
Yes.
Can I just...
yes, please.
Sorry, if you don't mind. The S Group is a known entity. It is a registered company with its ACN number. So yeah, we just need to correct that for the record.
Where does it show that, General Manager?
On their website, Mayor.
Yep.
Is it a proprietary limited company or a limited company?
Proprietary limited company.
I see. Well, that answers the query. It'd be nice if we made sure that our form insisted that the detail of the legal entity in support of any application be set forth, as well as the name and address, rather than just a particular contact person. I know if I ring my General Practice Plus group, I can't speak to a doctor or even a proprietor. I end up by speaking to a receptionist that fields all the calls. And it may have been that a contact person is someone of that calibre. But seeing that there are no other councillors wishing to speak to the motion.
Speak.
Yes, please, Councillor Simons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A comment. Look, and I really appreciate the work that the councillors have put into their motions and their arguments here, but I can't support the motion today. We've got a qualified report here from our planning expert that indicates that this should be passed for an approval, and I think, whilst I can see that there is an opposing argument to it, I think it's an unreasonable thing to have this end up in a tribunal for ratepayers to have to fund on what is a principle. I think there's other forums that this needs to change so that we aren't put in this position, but I just don't see it as being fair, and I'm quite happy to follow the planner's advice. I'm quite comfortable with the work they do, and I really hope this doesn't end up costing ratepayers a substantial amount of money.
Thank you very much. Yes, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with Councillor Simons. I can't support the refusal motion.
Does anyone else wish to comment? Well, I put this motion. All
Mr.
those.
Mayor, Mr. Mayor.
Yes,
sorry.
please.
Councillor Breeny wishes.
Mayor, can I have a response to Councillor Simon's comment?
Yes.
Is that permitted as meeting procedures?
Is this sorry? Is this
I'm authorising you to reply, to respond.
It's just in relation to the comment about costing ratepayers money. One of the reasons, it's patently obvious to all of us sitting around this table of the issues of refusal and the likelihood of appeal and the cost of appeals for issues and for reasons such as this. I too have thought very seriously about the implications financially to this council of unsuccessfully defending a motion that I might have put, or others may put, or I might support or not. And I do understand the concerns of that. However, if I was to base my planning authority decisions, the decisions that we are supposed to make using what is expected to be sound judgment to determine whether a proposal meets the relevant criteria, and take into consideration matters raised by representatives. And by the way, I'm not the only person who feels this way. As one of the representatives spoke directly to this issue and had quite a substantial statement to make in relation to the matters that are raised in this motion. Not that singularly influenced my decision to present this motion, but one of the things that I did take into consideration just in passing was the fact that, yes, this may be a financial situation, but if I was to make any planning decision as a planning authority member, based on the fact that it's the least expensive way of doing things, I would be abrogating my responsibilities as a planning authority member. I deal with it on the information that's given, the information that I seek, and following the section of the Land Use Planning Act that requires us to act as a planning authority. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, Deputy Mayor Woods.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just asking a question before I say anything. Was that Councillor Breeny's closure to the motion?
Yes.
Yes.
And was the proposer, yes.
Okay, so I can't say anything. That's fine.
Well, if Councillor Simons raised something which was novel, and I permit you if you wish to speak about what Councillor Simons raised.
Well, no, because it goes against meeting procedures, Mayor. Sorry.
Well, I can authorise it because it's not as if the Local Government Act deals specifically with the unusual provisions of the Land Use and Planning Approvals Act, and the local government provisions for ordinary, normal council matters might well be appropriate. But if you wish to speak, don't feel obliged to if you don't.
I do wish to speak, if I may, with everyone else's consent.
You may.
I'm trying to get the right words. The author of this application was previously commended on the way they presented the one before, the Cambria Drive development application, and the same author has written up this report for us, yet it is up now for refusal. I have listened intently to debate on this, and I commend councillors for doing what their homework
that will do, we understand.
Research. However, I can't support the refusal on this today, this motion, this application. But I do appreciate the work that councillors have put into it. Thank you.
Does anyone wish to say anything further? Well, I put the motion. All those in favour, please raise their hand.
Right.
And they have to make a noise because otherwise I won't see you on the screen. That's Councillor Breeny. Who else?
Councillor Churchill.
Councillor Robinson.
Councillor Churchill. Who else?
Councillor Robinson.
Councillor Robinson. Who else?
I think Councillor Browning's got her on mute.
I can't hear what Councillor Browning's saying, and thus she doesn't show on the screen.
I'm for the motion.
I will support the motion. Does our minute secretary have the list of those supporting the motion?
So do you want me to respond? So I'll repeat them to you. So supporting the motion, As it stands, Councillor Breeny's motion, Councillor Breeny, Councillor Churchill, Councillor Browning, Councillor Robinson, and Mayor Robert Young.
All those against the motion, please indicate by making a noise and raising their hand. Deputy Mayor Woods, I can see that.
Councillor Simons.
Councillor Arnold.
Councillor. Councillor Simons, who else?
Councillor Arnold.
Thank you. Is that all of us now?
Yes.
Yes. Well, I declare the motion passed. A difficult matter. I think the Local Government Act needs a bit of reform when it comes to planning side of dealing with motions because of the difficulty in indicating the reasons for a planning decision. The next item is item on page 45, financial report.
Mayor,
Yes.
I will move that council no longer acts as a planning authority at 2:57 p.m.
Thank you very much.
Seconded, Councillor
Thank you.
Arnold.
All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried unanimously. Thank you for that. I hadn't marked that section. Now, next item is item 5, page 45, financial reports. Can I have a motion?
Councillor Browning, I move that council receive and note the financial reports as attached to this report for the period ending the 31st of January 2022.
Seconded, Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Do either of the mover or seconder wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Mayor. Councillor Browning, I'd just like to say well done to the finance people. They're doing a fantastic job and it looks like we're not doing too badly, really. So thank you.
Councillor Robinson.
Is anyone else? Yes, Councillor Robinson.
Yeah. That was exactly what I was going to refer to, Councillor Browning. After looking at the financial reports, it seems that we're certainly in a much better position now than we were, say, 2 years ago. So it's really good to see, and thanks to all the people that work in finance for producing the report, and also the way that the finances are now being handled is to be commended.
Here.
Yeah, thank you. I understand that cash flows are a lot better than they used to be. Does anyone else wish to speak to or against the motion?
Yeah, I'll speak if that's okay, Mayor.
Yes, please, Councillor Churchill.
Yeah, if I can I just want to point out a couple of the highlights for me in these financial reports, because I keep a bit of an eye to them. And in the P&L, the profit and loss, employee costs are running at around 7% below budget, and materials and services are running at 3% below budget. And they're two of the ones that are highly significant. And if we have a look at the balance sheet, the current liabilities are down approximately $1 million on last year. No, not quite that much. Yeah, a bit more than that on last year. That's looking really good. And on the cash flows, if you have a look at those, we've got positive net cash flows, and I think these things are really showing up the results of a lot of good decision making on the part of, I guess council can take a little bit of the credit, but certainly council staff appear to be doing a great job at this stage, and thank you very much for all of the hard work.
Here.
I'd put the motion.
We don't have
And all those in favour, please raise their hand and say aye.
to say that.
Aye.
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 Against?
Pop it on there.
I declare
It's a pain.
the motion carried. General Manager, we can hear the comments. Not that we mind, but we can hear the comments.
Did you hear me say the mute is a pain, Mr. Mayor? That's what I said. I wasn't referring to anyone, I was referring to our technology. And I said the mute is a pain.
I heard it.
I can promise I was not referring to anyone.
Someone rang me today when I was within about 50 metres of the Prime Minister, and I was and a person with earphone in his ear and wire going down his suit coat pocket with a bulge in his pocket came rushing over and told me to shut up, the microphones can pick it up. Well, that's good. So item 6, I declare the motion carried unanimously. Item 6, section 24 committee, no reports. Item 7, information reports. There's a Director of Works report from our Director, Mr. Porch. Can I have a motion, please?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll move. Councillor Woods.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Woods.
Thank you. I'll move that council notes the information.
Is there a seconder?
Councillor Browning.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Browning. Is there any discussion?
Yes,
Councillor Robinson, can I, through you, Mayor, just say something quickly?
Yes, please.
I had reason to put in a couple of work requests on behalf of ratepayers only last week, and I'd just like to commend Darren and his team. They addressed them within the space of 2 days and all completed, so very impressive.
Well done.
Thank you very much.
Mayor,
Does
if I
anyone
could
else?
make a statement, Councillor Breeny.
Yes, please, Councillor Browning.
Just a comment in relation to some of the issues raised, and one of the classic things that I see this council staff handling are the issues that are very pleasing to somebody who, for example, passes the Bicheno waste management site on a regular basis. The intersection of the access driveway has now been negotiated through liaison with staff with State Growth and Wallaroo Contracting to provide a safer access to the waste transfer station through the proposed industrial subdivision, Wallaroo's subdivision further up the straight of the road, which makes things safe. It's really pleasing to know that when these things crop up and these availability things crop up, that council staff are onto it and doing something safe. It's great to see it. Thank you.
Thank you. Does
Mr.
anyone?
Mayor?
Oh, yes, Deputy Mayor Woods.
thank you. On page 49 of the report, under waste management, it says fermentation trial results are not promising. The process does not seem to be viable. Can I please ask Mr. Porch through you to elaborate on that comment, please?
Yes, of course, Deputy Mayor Woods. Mr. Porch, is he in attendance?
Yes, certainly, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we've had one trial with a view to having additional ones. The process is quite time-consuming, involves a range of plant and other things, and simply, I guess, looking at options for how else we might deal with it, talking to other councils about their processes. We understood that Break a Day had done some work with fermentation. They haven't, and adopting a similar practice to Latrobe Council, where simply through chipping and mulching, Latrobe Council are able to sell back to the public and use within their municipality mulch material, and Break a Day are doing a similar thing. We're making some inquiries there with respect to availability of chippers. information we had previously and previous experience was that Fieldwicks in the northwest are the only people who've had one of these mulches that are industrial scale, that do things quickly enough to make it worthwhile. There is a second company with one of these. Again, we've made inquiries there and waiting for some costs for the mulching. If we were to do fermentation, we'd still need to mulch it and mulch it down to a significantly small size. So again, from the trial we've done to date, which only involved a small amount of material, we don't see that we can do that on an economical scale to enable fermentation to be viable.
Thank you for that. With regards, if I may again, Mayor, through you to Mr. Porch.
Yes, please.
With regards to the chipping and mulching, the contamination issue that is, you know, can be a bit of an issue. How are we going to alleviate that?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, look, in the same way that we have no different problem with that to other councils. Every council has the same issue where, you know, even asbestos sheets can go underneath the pile of green waste and get dragged out, and, you know, on the quiet around the back of the pile. All those sorts of things can occur at our waste transfer stations as well as any other. And it is simply a matter of monitoring that at the disposal to try and pick up those customers who may be trying to get rid of a little bit of stuff one way or another. The secondary is as the mulching process occurs, and that's lifted in by with these larger operations, lifted in by excavator grab, is to be observing, have an observer through that process and try and filter out any extraneous material, so that you've got a better product at the end of the day. The way that they manage, so weeds is your next problem then, and again it's a matter of monitoring your piles, ensuring that they that the heat within them gets to a certain range for a period of time to endeavour to nullify the impact of any.
Thank you very much for your explanation. Appreciate it.
Does anyone else have any queries?
Mayor, Councillor Browning.
Thank you, Councillor Browning.
I'd just like to say, like the email I sent, the sun is shining on the Swan River Road with the new ceiling that's going on. Thank you very much.
Good.
Thank you. I put the motion. All those, I'm sorry, did someone else wish to speak? I put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye and raise their hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Against? I declare the motion carried unanimously. Now, the next item is item 8, and that's item 8.1, Community Small Grant Application. Can I have a motion?
Councillor Arnold.
Thank you, Councillor Arnold.
Thank you. I'll move that council approve the applications for small grant funding of $1,000 for the Tribunna Village, Erdo, to assist in supporting the Tasmanian Career Booklet.
Councillor Bruni seconds that.
Thank you, Councillor Bruni. Councillor Arnold, do you wish to speak to the motion?
No, other than to say that I obviously support it. Erdo has played, and the Tribunna Village has played a significant part in bringing careers expos and the like to our community, and I see this as a worthwhile add-on to that process by that group of volunteers.
Councillor Bean is the seconder. Do you wish to speak to it?
Thank you, Mayor. I will refer. I would prefer to leave my comments till after you make your comments. I believe you have comments to make, and I would like to answer some of those comments in my reply.
Thank you. Yes, I do have a comment to make. I know the village area and the people that work there. They're very commendable, hard-working people that have provide great benefit to the community. But it's and we have dealt with them before. But thinking about these things, there is, I see, a general problem in referring to a name rather than a legal entity. I don't think there'll be any trouble with this particular beneficiary of a grant, because I'm sure the money will find its way to the right entity. I note, after Councillor Arnold brought it to my attention, that this entity is incorporated. It seems to me that we ought to know what the incorporated body is, ought to know it in a formal way, so that when we send a cheque, we can send it to the right entity and get a receipt from an authorised officer. Otherwise, I don't wish to say anything further about the matter. It's a little higher than the normal $1,000 or $1,500, but I think we ought to amend our small grant application form.
Correction, Mayor, it's for just the 1,000, the standard amount.
I'm sorry. Well, I'm reading the bit down the bottom. Yes, it's for $1,000.
Mr. Mayor, oh, sorry.
Yes, please go ahead.
Can I just make a comment? And it actually relates to all the community grant reports that are on the agenda today, but also for the future. As we work through these processes, there is no doubt that we're finding things that can be improved in terms of the assessment of the processes. At the back of our minds is always the thought that we need to make the process as easy as possible for our community groups, bearing in mind, you know, many of them are volunteers and many of them are giving freely of their time to get, so that's the one side of it, but also from a council perspective and a council officer perspective, we don't have the resources, and neither should we, I believe, to do detailed investigations of the status of entities. I totally agree with the Mayor's comments that at the very least there would need to be incorporated bodies as per our policy, and that's what we'll make sure when we tidy up the application form, which I believe has already been done, for future applications of this nature. But Erdo, this group that we're talking about today, the village is an entity, as you correctly pointed out, Mr. Mayor, as are the other two that we'll consider shortly. But I just want to say that we're recognising the improvements that can be made in the application process, and they will be rectified so that there will be more detailed information.
It's not pedantry on my part to raise it. Every executor of an estate has to make sure that when they send the legatee some money, they get a receipt from the authorised person, and it's not apparent from this application who is the authorised officer of this incorporated body. There are two other community grant applications. One is from an incorporated body, and it's a simple thing to note the corporation detail on an application. But that's all I have to say. Does anyone else have any comment to make about this application?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'd like to reply, make a comment. I understand what you're saying, and I appreciate your concerns. However, apart from the reassurances by our General Manager that the application forms may be reassessed and considered as we move on, one of the things that the community grants has always been how would you say it, appreciated in the community, is that these grants and applications for grants can be made by anybody. It's up to the council and councillors to decide whether or not, whoever they are, whether they're incorporated or not, whether they are worthy of the intent of the grants, that is, for community benefit, etc. For example, I've had personal experience of being involved in two groups who were never incorporated and never will be and never would even consider themselves to be necessarily incorporated. However, we do provide a social and community benefit, those two groups that I'm involved with. And both of those groups have been the beneficiary of small grants. One of them being a ukulele fun group and the other one being a drum corps. Now, we march up and down the street during a Christmas parade. That's all we do. We have volunteers. We don't have a general manager. We don't have a public entity. We don't have a bank account other than the bank account that's established to ensure that the money that came from council was accountable and that we sent back information at the end of it all to ensure that council are aware of where the money was spent, etc., and it was in accordance with the application.
Thank you.
Believe that these community grants need to be very carefully considered as a community benefit, not necessarily a business transaction. For example, the Amos family is asking for a committee or something or other, is asking for a grant. I'll talk to that issue later, and I shouldn't speak to it now, but I'll speak to this one that we're looking at. There's no doubt that an incorporated body such as this is, well, you know, I know it very well and the community knows it very well. I'm sure that most of the councillors, if not all of us, you yourself have mentioned, you know them very well. We know that this would be a sensible move. To have anything more that might be necessarily a safety measure in relation to somebody trying to deceive council and steal money is all very well, but if that's what happens, we're going to find ourselves with a lot of local groups who just haven't got the wherewithal to be incorporated, to have a public person,
Brenny,
and to register for the loan.
I don't dispute what you say. Look, Councillor Brenny, I think you misunderstand me. I don't say that any entity that seeks to have a community grant ought to be incorporated. You can have an unincorporated association and a group, such as the ukulele group. All it requires is someone to make the grant application and someone nominated to receive the money and give the receipt. That's the only thing I have difficulty with.
Mayor,
yes, Councillor Arnold.
As the mover of the second, I'd like to close this if I can. And to take your point up, when the applications are done, the person responsible for making the application does actually put their name forward. And at the end of the day, when the money is spent, that person or someone within the organisation has a responsibility to provide an acquittal to council. Now, whether the group is incorporated or not, someone takes responsibility by putting their name on the application form. And yes, we could put a whole lot more information required on the application form, but would it turn people away from actually applying? So I think we have to trust the fact that our staff assess the applications in accordance with our policy, and also that it's important to remember that the councillors sitting around the table are leaders in their various communities. We are elected members and we generally know the ins and outs of all the associations and bodies within our area. So I think we just have to trust that and trust the staff with the applications. If there needs to be some tweaking, to the application form, fine. Let's do it in another forum, in another report to council.
Well, that might be the case, Councillor Arnold. All I want to know is the name of the person who gets the money. They don't have to be anything special, just as long as you know the name and who signs the receipt.
But
Thank you.
Mr.
I'm
Mr.
going to
Mayor,
put the motion. All those in favour?
no, Mr. Mayor, you will not put the motion, because at the end of the day, what has happened here is that we're now questioning different organisations after months, after years of this community small grants. Like Councillor Bruni, I've been involved in a small grant application, and I put my name forward with the organisation that actually is to receive the money. So that information is already on the forms. But as I said,
it's not on the matter on the agenda. That's the matter. That's the issue. And I did look at the attachments. I couldn't see it. You can't send it to a nothing. You have to send it to an entity. That's the only point I make. I don't say they're unworthy. I don't say that they ought to be put through the ringer. Just ought to put their name in there. Now, all those in favour of the motion, please raise their hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Say aye. Against? Carried unanimously. Now, next item, 8.2. This is an application by the Amos Family Bicentenary Committee Incorporated. Can I have a motion?
No, it's Councillor Browning, Mayor. I'm leaving now.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm happy.
Can I have a motion? Councillor Browning. No, Councillor Browning, you must be on mute.
Thank you, Mayor. With respect, Councillor Simons was putting the motion, I believe.
I'm sorry. I thought you raised your hand and I couldn't see Councillor Simons. Councillor Simons, do you wish to put the motion?
Mr. Mayor, I'll put forward that the council approves the application for small grant funding of $1,000 to the Amos Family Bicentennial Committee Incorporated.
Thank you.
Oh, Councillor Greeny seconds that motion.
You didn't talk and I couldn't see your hand. You didn't come up on the screen. Councillor Greeny, did you second that?
That's correct, Mayor.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? I put the motion. All those in favour, please raise their hand and say yes.
Aye.
I declare the motion. Any against? I declare the motion carried unanimously, save for Councillor Browning, who declared an interest. If you have Councillor Browning come back onto the screen, please.
Yes.
Councillor Browning?
We're just inviting her back.
Councillor Browning? Oh, he's not back on yet.
No.
Councillor Browning is back.
I hear her voice. Councillor Browning, the motion was carried unanimously. Councillor Browning, can you hear me?
Thank you. Yes, I can.
Thank you very much. The next item is a small grant application, 8.3, Glamorgan Suicide Awareness Network. Can I have a motion?
I can put a motion there.
Thank you, Councillor Simon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll move that the council approves the application for small grant funding of $1,000 for the Glamorgan Suicide Prevention Awareness Network to assist in supporting mental health and suicide prevention awareness.
Councillor Arnold seconded. Councillor
Thank
Arnold.
you, Councillor Arnold. Thank you, Councillor Arnold. Is there any discussion?
No.
I put the motion. All those in favour, please raise their right hand and say aye.
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 Against? I declare it carried unanimous. I declare it carried unanimous. Now, the next item is Section 24 committees. Can I have a motion, please?
Yes, Councillor Breeny moves that Council endorses a review of the guidelines for Section 24 special committees of Council, and 2, endorses a review process for each individual Section 24 committee.
Councillor Robinson.
Is there a second?
Councillor Robinson. Second.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Is there any discussion?
Yes, thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Breeny.
Just basically, it's obvious from the report that this review is definitely required, although I don't expect that it'll find out anything dramatic, apart from the fact of rationalising what we have at the moment, which has been a pretty open-ended, long-term situation where the overview of Section 24 committees may not have been undertaken. This will be a good guide for future use of the special committees, and hopefully it may eliminate issues where some of the Section 24 committees have changed, as it says, their initial terms of reference, things like that need to be updated. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak for or against the motion?
Just a quick comment through
Councillor Robinson.
Just concurring with what Councillor Breeny says there, but also it'd be nice to see the new policy or the new guidelines reduced from its current 19 pages to be a little succinct, I think, a bit more specific and perhaps a little bit less unnecessary information in it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Robinson. Perhaps that sort of approach could be taken by the Local Government Office of Tasmania too. Does anyone else wish to speak to anything? If that's the case, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please raise their hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? Carried unanimously. Next item is 8.5, March storm damage. Is there a motion?
Yeah, I can put a motion, Mayor. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Robinson.
That Council progress with the emergency repair and allocate identified funds from the additional income sources to commence works on the outstanding repairs identified under this TRRA grant submission this financial year.
Thank you very much. Is there a seconder?
Happy to second that, Councillor Simons.
Thank you, Councillor Simons. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Not from me.
If that's the case, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, raise their right hand and say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary? I didn't hear a contrary voice. I declare the motion carried unanimously. The next item is 8.6, Code for Tenders and Contracts Review. A motion, please.
I'll move that. Oh, sorry. Councillor Churchill.
Thank you, Councillor Churchill.
As soon as I find the recommendation. I move that Council adopt proposed draft code for tenders and contracts.
Is there a second?
Seconded, Councillor Breeny.
Thank you, Councillor Breeny. Is there any discussion?
I'll just make the comment, if I may. This was well workshopped, and I think we all have a good understanding of the reasons why we need this particular tender document to be updated and put into place. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak for or against the motion? I put the motion. All those in favour, please raise their right hand and say aye.
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 To the contrary? I declare the motion carried unanimously. Next item is 8.7, Coles Bay half request for assistance and road closure.
The Mayor, I'll move. Councillor Woods.
Thank you, Councillor Wood.
So I'll move that council approves the part road closure of the Esplanade Coles Bay between Coles Bay Road and Jetty Road between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. on Saturday, the 5th of March 2022, for the organiser Atlas Events Proprietary Limited to conduct the Coles Bay Half Marathon event, and council advertise the road closure in accordance with policy. And I'll move
Do I have a second there?
No, I haven't finished.
No.
I'm sorry. Please go on.
2, council approve the application from Atlantis Half
Atlas.
Marathon. Atlas, sorry. Atlas. Event assist to the value of $950. A, in-kind support to supply and empty wheelie bins around the course valued at $450. And B, in-kind support to waive fees for permit applications incorporating advertising for road closure values at $500.
Seconded, Councillor Arnold.
Thank you, Councillor Arnold. Is there any discussion?
I'll reserve the closing. Thank you.
Councillor Churchill.
Yes, Councillor Churchill.
If I may, I'd just like to support Deputy Mayor Wood's motion. I think this organisation is a mature organisation now. I think they've developed to a point where it is being pulled together on largely a financial basis. It's very sound, and as it should be after 12 years. And I feel that council's obligations to this sort of mature event should be no more than the in-kind components of it. I think that we shouldn't feel obliged to be giving cash to this organisation. Thank you.
Councillor Browning.
Yes, Councillor Browning.
I agree with everything. I agree with the motion and that everything that Councillor Churchill has said. They've already got 149 registered participants for this year's event, and they had the biggest one I could find was they had I think 159 in some previous event. So they're doing well to get the numbers up. So I think the in-kind support is more, is what we should be looking at doing now. They're 12 years old and it's being run by a national triathlon company. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to say anything? Well, I put the motion. All those in favour, please raise their right hand and say. I'm sorry.
No.
Sorry, Councillor Woods.
I'm going to talk to closing. The reason why I have moved this motion, and I thank councillors for their support in it thus far, is for those reasons given by Councillor Churchill and Councillor Browning. We've talked. This event comes to council every year, other than when I don't know that they ran it last year through COVID or the year before. I'm not sure, but for quite a sizable amount of money. And now, as it is 12 years old, it should be standing on its own 2 feet per se. and I think, you know, it's a good thing for council or the community to be involved in-kind support, because that's showing support of the event, and to the value of $950. And I do wish them all every success in the running of the event. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just in case I missed anyone else wish to say anything? Well, I put the motion. All those in favour, please raise their right hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? I declare the motion carried unanimously. Next item is 8.8, insurance for crime and fraud protection.
Councillor Arnold.
Increase.
Councillor Arnold,
Yes.
I'll move that council agree to continuation with crime and fraud insurance cover through payment of the Chubb insurance. I'm guessing there should be premium in there for the 18-month policy covering January 2022 to June 2023.
Thank you very much, Councillor Arnold. I'd ask that the minute secretary note the inclusion. And, is there a seconder?
Councillor Robinson. Second that.
Councillor Robinson, thank you. Is there any discussion or any questions to ask?
Yes, thanks, Mayor, if I may. Just a
Yes.
comment, really. It's just a bit of a blowout with regards to the finances. You know, from $7,000 to $13,000 is a little bit hard to swallow, but that's insurance these days, unfortunately.
Absolutely.
Anyone else wish to ask questions? Can I ask our corporate director, what's the excess on this policy that we have to carry first ourselves?
I believe
25,000.
$25,000. So we carry out the first amount of stolen money, excess of 25, the larger amounts the insurers cover. Thank you. All those in favour of this motion, please raise their right hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? I declare the motion carried unanimously. Now, there are no notices of motion. There are no petitions. There are no questions from councillors. Are the questions on notice or without notice?
Yes, there is.
I'm sorry. Yes, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I know I've spoken about this.
Councillor Woods.
Yes, I know I've spoken to council about this on many occasions. However, I am going to speak about it again, and I have two requests on safety actually three. So the first one is the safety of the Orford Bridge for pedestrian and bike riders. I walk over this bridge, as do many. This bridge is on a major highway, and although the speed limit is 60 kilometres per hour, it is very concerning to me and others about the safety to pedestrians. There is no safety rail to stop pedestrians, that being young or old users, from tripping or falling onto the road into the traffic. It has been said that if there is a safety rail put there, it would not be to regulation standards. Is it to regulation standards now? And yes, I'm aware that there hasn't been an accident on the bridge, but my question is, do we really need to wait for that to happen before we do anything? We need to be proactive rather than reactive. We as councillors heard at a workshop briefing late last year about the safety upgrades to the Tasmanian Bridge at a huge cost to taxpayers. Can we at least start the conversation with state growth around this issue and advocate for the safety of our community? I will send these through to you, Miss Murray. 2, the safety of the pedestrians and bike riders entering the Orford Bridge from the walkway at the Tribunner end of the bridge. Users almost have to go onto the road with no safety barriers, and cars seem to whiz around the corner and you don't know that they're actually coming. I've become increasingly aware of this as I often walk with my grandchildren through this area with their bikes and on foot. And there's another request too on a safety issue. This one has been brought to my attention by a resident. Since Blue Waters Hotel have improved their car parking area at the front, it is now very hard to back out onto the road from parking outside the bottle shop. Is there a possibility to investigate the installation of a curved mirror for people to use when needing to back out onto the road? I know that we're not supposed to back out onto highways. However, even if you drive out, it's very difficult to see what's coming, particularly from the Orford Bridge area. So I will send these through to you, Miss Murray, for an answer at a later date. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Woods. It seems to me that those questions are appropriate for council to consider and raise with State Growth because they handle the highways. And the second point that may be of interest, and council doesn't have to rely on what I say because it's some years since I ceased practice, but there is an obligation, a common law obligation for big entities to bring their operations and buildings up to standard as the standards increase. It doesn't apply to ordinary people, small people, but it does for big operations. And that is something that perhaps we ought to raise with State Growth. Thank you for that. Those are very important matters.
If I may,
yes,
Mayor,
please.
just
Yes.
For councillors and staff to be aware of, Brian actually sought a meeting with the Minister Ferguson here a couple of weeks ago, which I did attend, which I also did bring up this particular issue with him. And I do know that I have asked this many, many times over the last few years. I don't want to wait for an accident to happen. And when you get older, you actually get more scared, I'm afraid to say. And when I'm walking across that bridge with absolutely no safety whatsoever for myself and or the dogs or the bike riders, or foot traffic, you actually have to stand aside or stop so you can let each other pass. You know, even if there is a barrier there, that's still fine. But at least we won't be falling onto the road, or the kids won't be falling onto the road, and so on. And there is a speed limit there I'm aware of. However, sometimes it doesn't seem to be adhered to. And as I said, I don't want to be reactive. I like to be proactive. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very well said.
Quickly through you, Mayor, just a quick response to Councillor Woods there that might or might not be useful. Minister Ferguson's now the new local government minister, and he's going to meet with us. So it might be an appropriate time for someone to, we'll be talking about other things, but to raise that issue with him.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Councillor Robinson. I know that I did ask Matt Healy, the new Director of Local Government, if Minister Ferguson could come up on the 4th of March, when the date that was allocated for Minister Jansen, he was Minister for Local Government, to attend. And I haven't had a response. I don't know whether the General Manager's had a response to that request or not.
No, not yet, Mr. Mayor, but we've still got the date open. We haven't had a response, I don't believe, from Minister Jensen's office that they're not attending either.
Mayor, could I just make a comment in relation?
Yes, please.
Maybe if we could arrange to meet the minister on the bridge, might be a way to get something done urgently.
I actually was on the bridge with him, Councillor Brenny, if I might add to you. So the meeting was actually talked about the road infrastructure with regards to flooding and all that sort of stuff. So I did actually point it out to him very forcefully, if I may say.
Thank you very much for that. Perhaps we ought to contact the Director, Matt Healy, to see if the Minister's diary is free and if he will be attending to fill that vacant appointment date.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, can I just make a comment too, just to remind the councillors when the Orford, the Prosser River Master Plan goes out shortly for community consultation, that the area that we're talking about here, the bridge is the connection, the key connection, obviously between the two sides of the town. So there'll be opportunity through that consultation process to also raise this matter and make submissions in that regard. That'll be a good forum and a good strategic document to promote the issues that Councillor Jenny Woods has raised.
Thank you.
If Council wish me to write to the Minister and the Solicitor General about the dangers of the bridge not having a compliant footpath, I'd be happy to do it. Perhaps you could indicate to the General Manager if at some stage what your thoughts on that matter are. The next item is item 12, confidential items, closed session. Can I have a motion about moving into closed session? But thank you, Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that Council moves into closed session at 3:47.
Thank you. Is there a seconder?
Councillor Arnold.
Thanks, Councillor Arnold. All those in favour, please raise their right hand and say aye.
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 I declare the motion carried unanimously. We'll now move into closed session.
Subject to recording.
Yes. Well, we'll wait to hear from